The cantina on Harmony's Edge was filled with smoke and the sounds of a dozen different alien languages mixing together. Traders, soldiers, and diplomats from across the galaxy sat at tables made from metal that could survive plasma fire. The air recyclers worked overtime to handle the mix of gases that different species needed to breathe. Kextal sat at a corner table, his forearms wrapped around a drink that glowed blue in the dim light. His mandibles clicked slowly as he watched a group of young traders arguing about which species in the galaxy was the most dangerous. The Vorthon had seen more battles than most beings saw in 10 lifetimes, and his scarred exoskeleton told stories of fights he had barely survived. "The Krithari are the strongest," said a young Balorian, his thick hide marked with the trading company symbols that showed he was new to deep space work. "They can tear through battle armor with their bare hands." "Wrong," replied a slim Zalani female. Her name was Prin, and she moved with the quick confidence of someone who had never faced real danger. "The Xerians are worse. Their poison can kill anything that breathes oxygen." Kextal's drink made a soft bubbling sound as he took another sip. He had fought Krithari warriors and survived Xerian poison attacks. He had seen things that would make these youngsters run back to their homeworlds and never leave again. "You are all thinking too small," said another trader, this one from a species Kextal didn't recognize. "The real danger comes from the hive minds. The collective can control entire star systems." The argument went on for several minutes. Each young trader tried to prove they knew more about the galaxy's dangers than the others. They talked about wars and weapons and monsters that lived in the dark spaces between stars. Kextal listened and said nothing. Finally, Prin turned to look at him. "What about you, old-timer? You've been sitting there like you know something we don't. Which species do you think is the most dangerous?" Kextal set down his drink and looked at each of the young faces around the table. They were all so certain, so ready to prove how brave and smart they were. He remembered being that young once, before he learned what real fear looked like. "I have fought Krithari in single combat," he said, his voice quiet, but carrying clearly over the cantina noise. "Their strength is real, but they follow rules. Honor codes. You can predict what they will do." He held up one of his 4 hands, showing a scar that ran from his wrist to his elbow. This came from a Xerian blade, coated in their deadliest poison. But Xerians think before they act. They plan. They wait for the right moment. Prin leaned forward, interested despite herself. "So what's worse than that?" Kextal's mandibles clicked faster, a sign of nervousness in his species. "The most dangerous beings in the galaxy are the ones who don't think something is impossible just because everyone says it is. The ones who look at certain death and say, 'That looks fun.'" "What species is that?" asked the Balorian. "Humans," Kextal said. "The Deathworlders." The table erupted in laughter. Even some of the other patrons at nearby tables turned to look. Prin wiped her eyes and grinned at the old Vorthan. "Humans? Really? They're not even the strongest species. They can't breathe half the gases in the galaxy without masks. Their bones break if you look at them wrong." "They're soft," agreed the Balorian, "pink and squishy and weak." Kextal waited for the laughter to die down. When the table was quiet again, he leaned forward, his 4 arms resting on the metal surface. "Physical strength is not what makes them dangerous," he said. "It's something else. Something worse." "What?" Prin challenged. "They don't understand the word impossible. When every other species in the galaxy looks at a problem and says it can't be done, humans just start trying different ways to do it." The young traders looked confused. Kextal tried to think of a way to explain it that they would understand. 5 years ago, I was working security for a cargo run to the Outer Rim. Dangerous work, but the pay was good. Our convoy was attacked by pirates near the Chronos system." He paused to take another drink, letting the memory settle in his mind. 3 ships attacked us. Military-grade weapons. Our escorts were destroyed in the first few minutes. The cargo ship I was on had no weapons, no armor worth mentioning. We should have surrendered. "But you didn't?" asked Prin. "The ship's engineer was human, a small female named Rebecca. When the captain said we should give up, she looked at him and said, 'Hold my beer.'" Kextal's mandibles stopped clicking. The table had gone completely quiet. "She took the cargo ship's waste disposal system and turned it into a weapon. She used the food synthesizers to create explosive compounds. She made the artificial gravity generators work backward and forward so fast that the attacking ships couldn't keep their aim steady." The young traders stared at him. "We won," Kextall continued. A cargo ship with no weapons destroyed 3 military attack vessels because one human refused to accept that we were beaten. That's just one story, said Prin, but her voice was less certain now. Kextall looked directly at her. I have worked with 17 different species across 43 star systems. I have fought in 6 wars and survived more battles than I can count. And in all that time, I have learned one rule that has kept me alive. He stood up from the table, dropping credits next to his empty glass. If a human ever says, "Hold my beer," you drop everything and run. I don't care if you're in the middle of the most important business deal of your life. I don't care if running will cost you everything you own. You run, and you run fast. Why? Prin asked. Kextall looked down at her with all 4 of his compound eyes. Because when a human says those words, they are about to do something that should be impossible, and usually they succeed, but everything around them tends to explode, catch fire, or get thrown across the room in the process. He turned to walk away, then stopped and looked back at the table. The words, "Hold my beer," are the most dangerous phrase in any human language. Remember that, and you might live long enough to become as old and scarred as me. With that, Kextall walked through the cantina and disappeared into the crowd of aliens near the bar. The young trader sat in silence for a long time, thinking about what the old Vorthon had told them. Prin finished her drink and tried to forget the conversation. After all, how dangerous could one human phrase really be? 6 months later, she would learn the answer to that question. Prin had almost forgotten about the old Vorthon's warning by the time she arrived at Kepler's Hope mining station. 6 months of steady work and good pay had a way of making scary stories seem less important. The mining operation was exactly the kind of job she had hoped to find when she left her homeworld. Profitable, straightforward, and far enough from civilization that the Galactic Council's regulations were more like suggestions. The station floated in orbit around a large asteroid field, pulling valuable minerals from rocks that had been drifting through space for millions of years. Commander Sarah Chen ran the operation with the kind of calm efficiency that Prin had come to expect from humans. The work was hard but fair, and the human crew treated the alien workers as equals. Prin had been assigned to inventory management, which suited her perfectly. She was good with numbers and organization, and the job kept her away from the more dangerous mining work. She shared a work shift with Marcus Webb, a human engineer who seemed to spend most of his time fixing things that should have been impossible to repair. Marcus was the kind of human that made other species nervous. He was tall and thin, with graying hair and hands that were always covered in grease or burn marks. He had a habit of looking at broken equipment the way other beings looked at interesting puzzles. When something stopped working, Marcus would stare at it for a few minutes, then start taking it apart with the kind of confidence that suggested he knew exactly what he was doing. The truth was that Marcus usually had no idea what he was doing. He just refused to believe that anything was permanently broken. On the day everything changed, Prin was working through the morning inventory reports when the station's alarm system started screaming. The sound was designed to cut through the noise of mining equipment and get everyone's attention immediately. It worked. Commander Chen's voice came over the communication system, calm despite the urgent situation. "All hands to emergency stations. We have received a Priority 1 distress signal." Prin dropped her datapad and hurried to the main control room along with the rest of the day shift crew. The room was already crowded with humans and aliens, all trying to understand what was happening. The main display screen showed a massive passenger liner drifting toward a gas giant, leaving a trail of debris behind it. "The ship is called New Mumbai," Chen explained, pointing at the screen. "She's carrying 3,000 civilians, mostly families, moving to the new colonies in the Centauri sector. They suffered catastrophic engine failure 12 hours ago and have been drifting ever since." Prin felt her stomach drop as she looked at the numbers on the display. The passenger ship was caught in the gas giant's gravity well and falling toward the planet's crushing atmosphere. At their current rate of descent, they had less than 6 hours before the atmospheric pressure would tear the ship apart. "Where are the rescue ships?" asked Dr. Martinez, the station's medical officer. Chen's expression was grim. "The nearest Council rescue vessel is 3 days away. Commercial ships in the area are too small to handle an evacuation of this size. We've sent out emergency broadcasts, but—" She didn't need to finish. Everyone in the room understood. 3,000 people were going to die, and there was nothing anyone could do about it. The alien crew members immediately started discussing evacuation procedures for the mining station. When the passenger liner broke up in the gas giant's atmosphere, the debris field would spread across the entire system. Kepler's Hope would need to move to a safer orbit or risk being hit by chunks of hull plating traveling at thousands of kilometers per second. Prin found herself thinking about escape routes and emergency protocols. It was a terrible situation, but there was no point in taking unnecessary risks. The passengers on New Mumbai were already dead. They just didn't know it yet. That was when Marcus Webb spoke up from the back of the room. "Hold my beer," he said to Jake Harrison, the miner standing next to him. "I've got an idea." The room went completely silent. Prin felt the blood drain from her face as Kextal's warning echoed in her memory. She looked around at the other aliens in the room and saw the same recognition in their eyes. Jake took Marcus's beer without question, the way humans always seem to do when one of them said those words. "What are you thinking, Marcus?" Marcus walked to the front of the room, his eyes fixed on the display screen showing the doomed passenger liner. Prin could practically see the gears turning in his head as he studied the problem. "We can't get to them with any of our regular ships," he said, talking more to himself than to the room. "The ore haulers are too slow, and the shuttles don't have enough life support for that many people." "That's right," Chen said carefully, "which is why we need to focus on getting this station to safety. Before." "But what if we modify one of the haulers?" Marcus interrupted, turning to face the room with the kind of expression that made experienced spacers very nervous. "Strip out the ore processing equipment, boost the life support systems, and add some extra shielding." Dr. Martinez shook her head. "Even if we could make those modifications in 6 hours, which we can't. The haulers weren't designed for atmospheric flight. They'd break apart as soon as they hit the gas giant's upper atmosphere." "Not if we add a heat shield," Marcus said, his voice getting more excited as the idea developed. "We could use the mining charges to blow off sections of the station's outer hull. The metal plating would work as ablative armor." Commander Chen stared at him. "Marcus, you're talking about flying into a gas giant in a jury-rigged ore hauler. That's not a rescue mission. That's an elaborate way to commit suicide." "Is it though?" Marcus asked. He moved to the control console and started pulling up technical specifications for the station's equipment. "Look, we have industrial-grade mining lasers that can cut through anything. We have magnetic containment fields designed to handle unstable materials. We have explosive charges that can move asteroids." Prin watched in growing horror as Marcus outlined his plan. He wanted to convert the mining station's equipment into an improvised rescue ship. The idea was insane. It violated every principle of safe engineering and basic common sense. "The probability of success is less than 1%, said Vexin, one of the Krithari engineers. His species was known for their practical approach to problem solving, which made his next words even more disturbing. "But it is not 0%. Chen looked around the room at her crew. The humans were nodding thoughtfully, as if Marcus had suggested something reasonable. The aliens looked like they were planning their last wills and testaments. "Even if the plan worked," Chen said slowly, "we'd be risking the lives of everyone on this station to save people we've never met." Marcus shrugged. 3,000 people, Commander. Families, kids." Chen was quiet for a long moment, staring at the display screen. Finally, she turned back to Marcus with the kind of smile that made Prin want to hide under her desk. "That's either the most brilliant thing I've ever heard, or the stupidest," Chen said. "Either way, it's crazy enough to work." The room erupted into activity as the humans started planning the impossible rescue mission. Prin tried to back toward the door, but Jake Harrison was already sealing the emergency bulkheads. "We'll need every hand for this," Chen announced cheerfully, as if they were planning a picnic instead of certain death. "Nobody leaves the station until we're done." Prin closed her eyes and tried to remember if she had updated her insurance policy recently. The main planning room on Kepler's Hope had been transformed into something that looked like a war council if war councils were run by people who had given up on sanity. Marcus stood in front of a holographic display showing the mining station's technical specifications, while Commander Chen and the other humans studied his plan with the kind of serious attention usually reserved for funeral arrangements. Prin sat in the back corner with the other non-human crew members, all of them frantically running calculations on their personal computers. The numbers were not encouraging. "Let me make sure I understand this correctly," said Dr. Keth, the station's Zelani psychologist. Her voice was very calm, which was usually a bad sign. You want to remove the ore processing equipment from Hauler 3, install additional life support systems, and then fly it into the atmosphere of a gas giant to rescue 3,000 people from a ship that will be crushed by atmospheric pressure in 5 hours. That's the basic idea, Marcus said cheerfully, though we'll need to add some modifications. He touched the holographic display, and a detailed schematic of the ore hauler appeared in the air. The ship was designed for moving large amounts of processed minerals between the station and transport vessels. It was built for durability, not speed or atmospheric flight. First, we strip out all the ore storage compartments and replace them with emergency life support pods. Jake's team can cannibalize the systems from the maintenance shuttles. Jake Harrison nodded from where he stood near the display. We've got enough parts to support maybe 1,500 people for a few hours, not 3,000. We'll deal with that problem when we get to it, Marcus said, waving his hand dismissively. Next, we need a heat shield for atmospheric entry. This was where the plan moved from merely dangerous to completely insane. Marcus highlighted several sections of the station's outer hull plating. We used the mining charges to blow off these sections here, here, and here. The hull plating is made from the same material they use on military ships. It should work as ablative armor if we attach it to the hauler correctly. Vexon, the Krathari engineer, made a sound that might have been laughter if his species was capable of finding anything funny. You want to blow up parts of our own station to armor a ship that was never designed to enter an atmosphere? Exactly, Marcus said, as if Vexon had just solved a difficult math problem. The explosive charges will give us perfectly shaped pieces of hull plating. We just need to weld them onto the hauler's frame. Prin's computer finished its probability calculation and displayed the result. She stared at the number for several seconds, hoping she had made an error. She hadn't. The chance of success is 0.0001%, she announced to the room. That's assuming everything goes perfectly, which it won't. What's the chance of success if we do nothing? Chen asked. 0%, Prin replied quietly. Then we're already ahead of the game, Chen said. Continue, Marcus. Marcus moved to another section of the display, showing the station's industrial equipment. Once we get to the passenger liner, we'll need to cut through their hull quickly. The mining lasers should work, but we'll need to modify them for precision cutting instead of bulk ore processing. Dr. Martinez raised her hand like a student in class. How do we plan to dock with a ship that's tumbling through a gas giant's atmosphere? We don't dock, Marcus said. We use the magnetic containment fields. The room went very quiet. Even the humans looked concerned. Marcus, Chen said carefully, those containment fields are designed to hold processed ore in place during transport. They're not meant for ship-to-ship operations. But they could work, right? Marcus asked. I mean, a ship is just a really big piece of metal when you think about it. Engineer Rodriguez, who had been silent until now, stepped forward. Theoretically, yes, but the power requirements would be enormous. We'd have to overload the entire electrical system. So we overload it, Marcus said with a shrug. What's the worst that could happen? Every alien in the room started talking at once, listing the dozens of ways that overloading the ship's electrical system could kill everyone involved. The humans listened politely, then began discussing ways to manage the power distribution problems. Prin found herself thinking about her family back on the Zelani homeworld. They would never understand how she had died. The official report would probably say something about a mining accident, which was technically true. There's another problem, Vexon said, his voice cutting through the chaos. Even if we successfully rescue the passengers, how do we get back out of the gas giant's gravity well? The hauler's engines aren't powerful enough to carry that much mass. Marcus grinned, and Prin realized that the human had been waiting for someone to ask that question. We use the gravity well as a slingshot, he said. Fly down into the planet's atmosphere, pick up speed, then use the momentum to launch ourselves back out. Dr. Keith made a small, choking sound. That's not how orbital mechanics work. Isn't it? Marcus asked. I mean, we used the same principle for asteroid mining. Drop down into a gravity well, use the acceleration to build up speed, then break free when we reach escape velocity. Asteroids don't have atmosphere, Rodriguez pointed out. Atmosphere creates drag. Drag slows you down. Only if you let it, Marcus said confidently. We just need to calculate the right approach angle. Prin looked at her computer screen again, hoping the probability numbers had changed. They had gotten worse. Commander Chen walked to the center of the room and looked around at her crew. "I want everyone to understand what we're volunteering for," she said. "This plan violates pretty much every safety regulation ever written. The chances of success are essentially zero. We're going to be flying a mining ship into a gas giant using equipment that was never designed for this kind of operation." She paused, meeting the eyes of each person in the room. "Anyone who wants to leave can take one of the emergency shuttles and head for the nearest space station. No one will think less of you. This is not a military operation, and no one is under orders to participate." The aliens in the room all started to stand up at the same time. Then Jake Harrison spoke up from near the door. "With respect, Commander, nobody's leaving. We're all in this together." The aliens sat back down, looking confused. Prin realized that the humans had already made their decision, and somehow that decision was binding on everyone else. "All right then," Chen said, checking her chronometer. "We have 4.5 hours to convert an ore hauler into a rescue ship and fly it into a gas giant. Rodriguez, you're in charge of the life support modifications. Jake, I need you to handle the explosive charges for the hull plating. Marcus, you get to figure out how to make everything work together." "What about the rest of us?" asked Dr. Keth. Chen smiled, and Prin realized that the commander was actually looking forward to the challenge. "Everyone else gets to help," Chen said, "and try to keep the humans from doing anything too dangerous." As the room erupted into organized chaos, Prin found herself wondering if there was a phrase in any alien language that was equivalent to "hold my beer." She hoped not. The galaxy was dangerous enough with just one species that refused to understand the meaning of the word impossible. Outside the planning room, she could hear the sound of welding torches and explosive charges being prepared. The humans had already started working on their impossible plan. Prin closed her eyes and tried to remember how to pray in 3 different languages. The modified ore hauler that had once been called Steady Income was now officially designated as Definitely Not a Warship, which Marcus insisted was the most honest name they could give it. The ship barely resembled its original design after 4 hours of frantic modifications. Hull plating from the mining station had been welded to every available surface, giving it the appearance of a metal porcupine that had been hit by lightning. Prin strapped herself into what used to be an ore storage compartment and was now supposedly a passenger rescue module. The life support system made concerning whistling sounds, and she could see daylight through several gaps in the welding. Around her, the other non-human crew members were checking their emergency oxygen supplies and making peace with whatever gods they worshipped. "All stations report ready," Commander Chen announced over the communication system. She was piloting the ship from the hauler's original command center, which had been reinforced with extra shielding that Marcus claimed would protect them from minor atmospheric heating. "Define minor," Dr. Martinez had asked during the pre-flight briefing. "Well, we probably won't melt completely," Marcus had replied, which was not as reassuring as he seemed to think. The journey to the gas giant took 2 hours, during which nothing exploded or caught fire. This was so unusual that Rodriguez spent most of the trip checking and rechecking the ship's systems, convinced that something must be wrong. "Contact with New Mumbai in 30 seconds, announced Jake from the sensor station. "She's deeper in the atmosphere than we expected." Through the reinforced viewport, Prin could see the passenger liner tumbling slowly through clouds that glowed with electric storms. The ship's hull was already starting to buckle under the atmospheric pressure. Parts of the outer structure had been torn away, leaving ragged holes that leaked air and debris into the thick gas surrounding them. "Beginning atmospheric entry," Chen said, her voice calm despite the fact that they were about to attempt something that should kill everyone on board. The first sign that the plan was going to work exactly as badly as physics predicted came when their improvised heat shield caught fire. "That's normal," Marcus announced cheerfully as alarms started screaming throughout the ship. "A blade of armor is supposed to burn off. That's how it protects us." "It's burning really fast," Rodriguez called from the engine room. "Like, really, really fast." "How fast is too fast?" Chen asked. There was a pause while Rodriguez consulted his instruments. "We passed too fast about 30 seconds ago. Now we're in the category of impressively fast." The ship shuddered as they hit the denser layers of the gas giant's atmosphere. The magnetic containment fields that were supposed to hold the hull plating in place began fluctuating wildly, causing sections of their improvised armor to vibrate like guitar strings. Magnetic field stability at 60% and dropping, reported Jake. Should I try to compensate? Negative, Marcus replied. Let it fluctuate. The vibration will help disperse the heat. That's not how thermodynamics work, Dr. Keth pointed out. It is today, Marcus said confidently. The mining lasers, which were supposed to cut precise holes in New Mumbai's hull, began overheating as soon as they tried to use them. The power couplings were never designed to operate in the middle of an electrical storm, and the atmospheric interference was causing feedback loops in the targeting system. Lasers are offline, Jake reported. We can't cut through the passenger ship's hull. Any reasonable species would have aborted the mission at this point. The plan had already failed in 3 different ways, and they hadn't even reached the rescue ship yet. Rodriguez's voice came over the communication system from the engine room. I think I can. Fix the laser problem. How? Chen asked. I'm going to recalibrate the power couplings. Prin had worked with humans long enough to know that recalibrate was human engineering slang for hit it with a wrench until it works. She was right. Through the ship's hull, she could hear the distinctive sound of Rodriguez applying percussive maintenance to delicate electronic equipment. Lasers back online, Jake announced, though I'm getting some strange readings from the targeting system. Strange how? Chen asked. Well, according to the computer, we're currently aiming at a small moon that doesn't exist. Close enough, Marcus said. Begin cutting operations. The mining lasers carved through New Mumbai's hull like it was made of paper, which was impressive until Prin realized that the passenger ship's structural integrity was probably much lower than normal due to atmospheric pressure. They were essentially cutting holes in a ship that was already being crushed like an aluminum can. Docking tube deployed, Jake reported, though I use the term tube loosely. It's more like a flexible tunnel held together with mining cable and hope. Chen brought the hauler alongside the passenger liner with the kind of precision flying that should have been impossible in the middle of a gas giant storm. The magnetic containment fields grabbed onto New Mumbai's hull and held the 2 ships together, creating a seal that was technically airtight as long as no one looked too closely at the gaps. Beginning passenger evacuation, announced Dr. Martinez, who was leading the rescue team. First group is coming aboard now. This was when they discovered the next problem with their plan. The life support systems they had installed were designed to handle 1,500 people for a few hours. New Mumbai was carrying 3,000 passengers, and they needed to get everyone off the ship in less than an hour before the atmospheric pressure tore both vessels apart. We're overloaded, Rodriguez called from the engine room. The air recyclers can't handle this many people. Marcus appeared on the communication channel again because, of course he did. What if we use the ore processing systems? We stripped those out to make room for passengers, Jake pointed out. No, I mean the atmospheric processors from the mining equipment. They're designed to extract oxygen from asteroid minerals. Maybe they can extract it from carbon dioxide too. That's actually not completely insane, Rodriguez admitted. While Rodriguez and Marcus worked on converting mining equipment into backup life support, Chen was dealing with a different problem. The ship was so overloaded with passengers that it was becoming increasingly difficult to control. We're way over mass limits, she announced. Even if we can get out of the atmosphere, we don't have enough engine power to reach escape velocity. What about the mining charges? Suggested Jake. We could use them as improvised rocket boosters. Pilot Davis, who had been quiet up to this point, finally spoke up from the navigator station. That could work, but we'd have to time the detonations perfectly. One mistake, and we blow ourselves up. Or we could try aggressive negotiation with gravity, Davis continued thoughtfully. What does that mean? Dr. Keth asked. Davis grinned, and Prin realized that all humans had the same expression when they were about to do something that should be impossible. It means we fly the ship in a way that should tear it apart, but probably won't if we're really lucky and really good. As the last group of passengers crowded into the overcrowded hauler, Prin found herself thinking about the old Vorthon's warning. He had said that humans were dangerous because they didn't understand the word impossible. Watching them work, Prin realized that wasn't quite right. Humans understood that things were impossible. They just didn't care. They treated the laws of physics like suggestions rather than absolute rules. When something couldn't be done, they found a way to do it anyway. All passengers aboard, Dr. Martinez reported. Though I'm not sure how we're all fitting in here. Physics? Marcus said cheerfully, as if that explained everything. Everyone hang on, Chen announced. We're about to attempt something that's either going to save us all or kill us very quickly. Outside the hull, Prin could hear the sound of mining charges being armed. The ship's engine began building power for an escape attempt that violated several fundamental principles of orbital mechanics. Beginning ascent in 3, 2, 1, Davis announced. The ship lurched upward with a force that pressed Prin into her seat. Through the gaps in the hull plating, she could see the gas giant's atmosphere rushing past them at speeds that should have torn the ship apart. Somehow, impossibly, they were still in one piece. The humans had done it again. They had taken a problem that should have been impossible to solve and solved it through a combination of engineering creativity, explosive charges, and complete disregard for what the universe considered reasonable. The escape from the gas giant's atmosphere was a controlled disaster that somehow managed to be successful and terrifying at the same time. The modified ore hauler climbed through layers of crushing atmosphere, while held together by mining cables, human stubbornness, and what Rodriguez cheerfully called applied wishful thinking. Half of the ship's systems were offline. Warning alarms were screaming in 6 different languages, and the hull plating was shedding pieces of ablative armor like a metal snake molting in space. The life support systems were operating at 300% of their design capacity, which meant everyone was breathing air that tasted like recycled mining equipment and determination. Gravitational escape in 30 seconds, Davis announced from the pilot station. He was flying the ship using a combination of official navigation protocols and what he called aggressive negotiation with physics. This involved pointing the ship in directions that should have torn it apart and somehow making it work through sheer force of will. The mining charges that Marcus had repurposed as rocket boosters detonated in sequence, each explosion adding thrust that pushed them faster toward escape velocity. The timing had to be perfect, or they would blow themselves to pieces. Naturally, the humans treated this like a mildly interesting technical challenge rather than a matter of life and death. Charge 7 firing in 3, 2, 1, Jake announced. The explosion sent vibrations through the ship's hull that made Prin's teeth ache. Around her, 3,000 rescued passengers held onto whatever they could find and tried not to think about the fact that they were traveling through space in a ship that was barely holding together. Escape velocity achieved, Davis reported. We are officially no longer falling into a gas giant. The cheer that went up from the passenger compartments was loud enough to be heard over the sound of failing life support systems. Dr. Martinez moved through the crowded sections, checking on people who had been injured during the escape, while Rodriguez worked frantically to keep the air recyclers from completely shutting down. Prin found herself staring out of one of the viewports at the gas giant they had just escaped from. The planet looked peaceful from this distance, like a giant marble of swirling colors. It was hard to believe they had just flown into its atmosphere and lived to tell about it. Station Harmony's Edge. This is definitely not a warship requesting emergency docking, Chen announced into the communication system. We have 3,000 passengers aboard and are currently held together by mining equipment and prayer. The response came back immediately. Definitely not a warship. This is Harmony's Edge Control. Please confirm your passenger count. Did you say 3,000? Confirmed control. 3,000 passengers rescued from the liner New Mumbai. We're going to need medical assistance and probably a structural engineer who specializes in impossible repairs. There was a long pause before control responded. Understood, warship. You are cleared for emergency docking at Bay 7. And good work out there. The docking process took 2 hours because the hauler's navigation systems had been damaged during atmospheric entry, and they had to be guided in manually by the station's tractor beams. During the docking procedure, Marcus spent his time walking through the ship with a toolkit, fixing things that had broken during their escape. The artificial gravity generator is making a funny noise, Dr. Martinez reported to him. Marcus listened to the machine for a few seconds, then hit it twice with a wrench. The funny noise stopped. Fixed, he announced, cheerfully, when the docking was finally complete and the passengers had been evacuated to the station's medical facilities. Prin found herself sitting in the ship's common area with the rest of the crew. They all looked exhausted, covered in grease stains and minor burns, and somehow satisfied with what they had accomplished. "So," Chen said, cracking open a beer that had somehow survived the entire rescue mission, "that went better than expected." "Better than expected?" Dr. Keth asked. "Half the ship is held together with mining cable. We're breathing air that was processed through ore refinement equipment. The hull plating is full of holes." "But everyone lived," Jake pointed out. 3,000 people who should have died are now safe on Harmony's edge. I call that a successful mission." Rodriguez nodded agreement. "Plus, we learned some interesting things about atmospheric entry techniques. That data could be useful for future mining operations." "Future mining operations?" Priyan asked weakly. "Sure," Marcus said, pulling out a data pad and starting to sketch diagrams. "Think about it. If we can modify an ore hauler for passenger rescue, we could probably modify one for deep atmosphere mining. Gas giants have some really valuable compounds in their lower atmospheres." Prin watched in growing horror as Marcus outlined his ideas for mining operations that would involve flying ships into gas giant atmospheres on a regular basis. He was treating their barely survived rescue mission as a proof of concept for even more dangerous operations. "Of course, we'd need better heat shielding," Marcus continued, apparently unaware that everyone else in the room was staring at him. "And probably some kind of improved magnetic containment system. Oh, and we'd have to figure out how to extract and process materials while flying through an electrical storm." "That's impossible," Vexon said automatically. Marcus looked up from his data pad with genuine surprise. "Is it?" There it was. The thing that made humans the most dangerous species in the galaxy. Not their strength, not their weapons, not their technology. It was their complete inability to understand that some things simply couldn't be done. Prin finally understood what Kextal had been trying to tell her in the cantina 6 months ago. When humans were faced with an impossible problem, they didn't waste time figuring out why it was impossible. They just started working on solutions. "You know," Marcus said thoughtfully, "we should probably write up a technical report about this rescue mission. Other crews might face similar situations." "What would you call it?" Chen asked. "How about improvised atmospheric rescue techniques using mining equipment?" Marcus suggested. "A practical guide." Dr. Martinez laughed. "Marcus, we just barely survived this. No one should ever try to replicate what we did." "Why not?" Marcus asked. "It worked." And that, Prin realized, was the human approach to everything. If it worked once, they would do it again. If it worked twice, they would write a manual about it. If it worked 3 times, they would start a training program. As the crew continued to discuss their impossible rescue mission like it was a routine mining operation, Prin quietly activated her personal communication device and composed a message to Kextal. "Your warning was insufficient," she wrote. "The phrase, 'hold my beer,' is not just dangerous. It is a declaration that a human is about to treat the laws of physics like polite suggestions. Recommend updating the warning to, if a Deathworlder ever says, 'hold my beer,' immediately contact your next of kin, make peace with your gods, and prepare to witness something that should be impossible." She paused, thinking about everything she had seen over the past few hours. "Also," she added, "if you survive witnessing a human do something impossible, do not assume you are safe. They will immediately begin planning something even more impossible as a follow-up. The concept of reasonable limits does not exist in human psychology." As she finished typing the message, Marcus looked up from his datapad with a new expression on his face. It was the same look he had worn right before suggesting they fly into a gas giant to rescue 3,000 people. "You know what?" he said to Jake. "Hold my beer. I want to run some calculations about converting this design for passenger transport." Prin sent her message to Kextal immediately, then started researching transfer requests to mining operations in safer parts of the galaxy, preferably ones without any humans. But as she looked around at the crew who had just accomplished the impossible, she found herself thinking that maybe, just maybe, she wanted to see what they would do next. After all, someone had to document the impossible things that humans did. And from what she had seen, they were just getting started. Outside the ship, the gas giant continued its slow rotation through space, peaceful and beautiful in the starlight. Somewhere in its crushing atmosphere, the wreckage of New Mumbai was being compressed into exotic metals that wouldn't be discovered for another 1,000 years. but 3,000 people were alive who should have been dead, and a small group of humans were already planning their next impossible project. In the cantinas and trading posts across the galaxy, the warning was being updated. The words, "Hold my beer," were becoming legend, and Marcus Webb was writing a manual.